Hello everybody and welcome back for my continuation of my book reading of Stephen King's Cell. Let's continue, shall we? "Come in," he said. "Hurry." Then he saw the girl lingering at a little distance and watching. "Not her." "Yes, her," Clay said. "Come on, honey." But she wouldn't, and when Clay took a step forward towards her, she whirled and took off running, the skirt of her dress flying out behind her. "She could die out there," Clay said. "Not my problem," the desk clerk said. "Are you coming? In or not, Mr. Riddle?" He had a Boston accent, not the blue-collar, sooty kind Clay was most familiar with from Maine, where it seemed that every third person you met was a Massachusetts expat. But the fuzzy "I wish I were British" once, it's Riddle. He was coming in all right. No way this guy was going to keep him out now that the door was open. But he lingered a moment longer on the sidewalk, looking after the girl. "Go on," Tom said quietly. "Nothing to be done." And he was right. Nothing to be done. That was the exact hell of it. He followed Tom in, and the desk clerk once more double-locked the door of the Atlantic Avenue Inn behind him, as if that were all it. Wow, I can't even read today. As if that were all it would take to keep them from the chaos of the street. "That was Franklin," said the desk clerk, as he led the way around the unformed man lying face down on the floor. "He looked too old to be a bellhop," Tom had said, peering in through the window. Clay thought he certainly did. He was a small man with a lot of luxuriant white hair. Unfortunately for him, the head on which it was probably still growing, hair and nails, were slow in getting the word, or so he had read somewhere, was cocked at the terrible crooked angle, like the head of a hanged man. He'd been with the inn for 35 years, and I'm sure he told every guest he ever checked in, most of them twice. That tight little accent grated on Clay's frayed nerves. He thought that if it had been a fart, it would have been the kind that comes out sounding like a party horn blown by kids with asthma. What? Wow. A man came out of the elevator, the desk clerk said, once more using the pass-through to get behind the desk. Back there was apparently where he felt at home. The overhead light struck his face, and Clay saw he was very pale. One of the crazy ones. Franklin had the bad luck to be standing right there in front of the doors. I don't suppose it crossed your mind to at least take the damn picture off his ass, Clay said. He bent down, picked up the Courier and Eve's print, and put it on the couch. At the same time, he brushed the dead bellman's foot off with the cushion where it had come to rest. It fell with a sound, and Clay knew very well he had rendered it in a great many comic books as clump. The man from the elevator only hit him with one punch, the desk clerk said. It knocked poor Franklin all the way against the wall. I think it broke his neck. In any case, that was what dislodged the picture, Franklin striking the wall. In the desk clerk's mind, this seemed to justify everything. But what about the man who hit him? Tom asked. The crazy guy? Where'd he go? Out, the desk clerk said. That was when I felt locking the door to be by far the wisest course. After he went out, he looked at him with a combination of fear and prurient? Well, it's a word I do not understand. I haven't even seen that word before. Prurient? Gossipy greed that Clay found singularly distasteful. What's happening out there? How bad has it gone? I think you must have a pretty good idea, Clee said. Isn't that why you locked the door? Yes, but what are you seeing on TV? Tom asked. Nothing. The cable's been out. He glanced at his watch. For almost half an hour now. What about the radio? The desk clerk gave Tom a pretty you must be joking look. Clee was starting to think this guy could write a book. How to be disliked on short notice. A radio in this place? In any downtown hotel? You must be joking. From outside came a high-pitched wail of fear. The girl in the blood-stained white dress appeared at the door again and began pounding on it with the flat of her hand, looking over her shoulder. As she did so, Clee started for her fast. Wait, what? Am I reading this right? Wait. Door again and pounding on it with the flat of her hand, looking over her shoulder as she did. Clee started for her fast. No, he locked it again, remember? Tom shouted at him. Clee hand. He turned to the desk clerk. Unlock it. No, the desk clerk said, and crossed both arms firmly over his narrow chest to show how firmly he meant to oppose this course of action. Outside, the girl in the white dress looked over her shoulder again and pounded harder. Her blood-streaked face was tight with terror. Clay pulled the butcher's knife out of his belt. He had almost forgotten it. I was sort of astonished at how quickly, how naturally it returned to mind. Open it, you son of a bitch, he told the desk clerk, or I'll cut your throat. No time, Tom yelled, and grabbed one of the high-backed, bogus Queen Anna chairs that flanked the lobby sofa. He ran it at the double door with the legs up. The girl saw him coming and cringed away, raising both of her hands to protect her face. At the same instant, the man who had been chasing her appeared in front of the door. He was an enormous construction worker type, with a slab of a gut pushing out the front of his yellow t-shirt, and a greasy salt and pepper ponytail bouncing up and down on the back of it. The chair legs hit the panes of glass and the double doors. The two legs on the left shadowed through Atlantic Avenue Inn, and the two on the right through Boston's finest address. The ones on the right punched into the construction worker type, meaty yellow clad left shoulder. Oh my god. Really? This writing, man. Just as he grabbed the girl by the neck, the underside of the chair seat fetched up against the solid seam where the two doors met, and Tom McCord went staggering backwards, dazed. The writing is very hard to understand. It goes so much into detail. Like, trying to come up with this picture on how everything looks. I don't think the writing is that good, actually. Even though I'm not a writer, but still, I think it goes a little bit too much into detail. Anyway, the construction worker guy was roaring out that speaking in tongue gibberish, and blood had begun to course down the freckled meat of his left bicep. The girl managed to pull free of him, but her feet tangled together, and she went down in a heap, half of the sidewalk and half in the gutter, crying out in pain and fear. Clay was standing framed in one of the shattered glass door panels, with no memory of crossing the room, and only the vanquished one of ranking the chair out of his way. Hey, dickweed, he shouted, and was marginally encouraged when the big man's flood of crazy talk ceased for a moment, and he froze in his tracks. Yeah, you, Klaus shouted. I'm talking to you. And then, because it was the only thing he could think of, and this is a text I'm not gonna read right now because it's a little bit too vulgar. Anyway, the large maniac in the yellow shirt cried out something that sounded eerily like what the power suit woman had cried out just before meeting her end, eerily like Rast, and rolled back towards the building that had suddenly grown teeth, and a voice attacked him. Wherever he saw it, couldn't have been a grim, sweaty-faced man with a knife in his hand, leaning out through rectangular panel that had lately held glass because Clay had to do no attacking at all. The man in the yellow shirt leaped onto the jutted blade of the butcher's knife. The Swedish steel slid smoothly into the hanging, sunburned waddle beneath his chin and released a red waterfall. It doused Clay's hand amazingly hot, almost hot as a freshly poured cup of coffee, it seemed. And he had to fight off an urge to pull away. Instead, he pushed forward, at last feeling the knife encountering resistance. It hesitated, but there was no buckle in that baby. It ripped through gristle, then came out through the nape of the big man's neck. He fell forward, and Clay couldn't hold him back with one arm. No way in hell. The guy had to go 260, maybe even 290, and for a moment leaned against the door like a drunk against a lamppost. Brown eyes bulging, nicotine-stained tongue hanging from one corner of his mouth, next spewing. Then his knees came unhinged and went down. Clay held onto the handle of the knife and was amazed on how easily it came back out. Much easier than pulling it back through the leather and reinforced particle board of the portfolio. With the lunatic down, he could see the girl again, one knee on the sidewalk and the other in the gutter, screaming through the curtain of hair hanging across her face. "Honey," he said, "honey, don't..." But she went on screaming. Her name was Alice Maxwell. Alice Maxwell. She could tell them that much, and she could tell them that she and her mother had come into Boston on the train from Oxford, she said, to do some shopping. A thing they often did on Wednesday, which she called her short day at the high school she attended. She said that she got off at the train at South Station and grabbed a cab. She said that the cab driver had been wearing a blue turban. She said the blue turban was the last thing she could remember until the bald desk clerk had finally unlocked the shattered double doors of the Atlantic Avenue Inn and let her in. See, this is the part I like. I don't really understand why he went back into it, into so much detail. Like, for example, this whole sentence, the last thing she could remember until the bald desk clerk had finally unlocked the shattered double door at the Atlantic Avenue Inn. Like, we already know that she's there. There was no need to, like, see all this of the Atlantic Avenue Inn. He could easily just wrote down, like, he had finally unlocked the shattered double doors of the inn, or something like that. Like, sometimes I feel like the writing is too much. There's too much detail in it. It almost like goes sideways. Clay thought she remembered more. She based this on the way she began to tremble when Tom McCourt asked her if either she or her mother had been carrying a cell phone. She claimed not to remember, but Clay was sure one of or both of them had been. Everyone did these days, it seems. He was just the exception that proved the rule, and there was Tom, who might owe his life to the cat that had knocked off the counter. They conversed with Alice. The conversation consisted for the most part with Clay asking questions, while the girl sat mutely, looking down at her scraped knees and shaking her head from time to time in the hotel lobby. Clay and Tom had moved Franklin's body behind the reception desk, dismissing the bald clerk's loud and bizarre protest that it will just be under my feet there. The clerk, who had given his name simply as Mr. Riccardi, had since retired to his inner office. Clay had followed him just long enough to ascertain that Mr. Riccardi had been telling the truth about the TV being out of commission. Then left him there. Sharon Riddle would have said Mr. Riccardi was brooding in his tent. The man hadn't let Clay go without a parting shot. However, now we're open to the world, he said bitterly. I hope you think you've accomplished something. Mr. Riccardi, Clay said, as patiently as he could. I saw a plane crash land on the other side of Boston Common, not an hour ago. It sounds like more planes, big ones, are doing the same thing at Logan. Maybe there's even making suicide runs on the terminals. There are explosions all over downtown. I see that this afternoon all of Boston is open to the world. As if to underline this point, a very heavy thump had come from above them. Mr. Riccardi didn't look up. He only flapped a begone hand in Clay's direction. With no TV to look at, he sat in his desk chair and looked severely at the wall. And I'm gonna stop it here, guys, for this reading. Yeah, I think here and there, what this book does, for whoever didn't noticed a couple of times, it's not an easy book to go through. I'm still very intrigued where the story will go. The only thing I don't like is that sometimes, like I mentioned before, sometimes the story itself, there's so much detail in it that it's very hard to keep following it. And the read, sometimes it's written, like, it loses my attention sometimes. But I'm gonna keep going with it. Because, like I said, I'm still curious on where it would go eventually, if we're gonna get more information about what's actually going on. And yeah, thank you so much for listening till this far. And maybe I'll see you next one. Take care. Bye bye.